Keith, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm enthused to be talking to you today. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Yes, yes, and listeners, before the podcast, Keith and I got to just catch up a little bit and talk about weather, talk about family, talk about living where, my desires to get out of the cold. So
Understood.
hopefully, Keith, we've already come to some agreement that, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But I think the thing to kind of prep this podcast for is that oftentimes we're focused on one thing, and sometimes that one thing maybe just takes a back seat while we get everything else in order. So I've got to put moving on the back seat to just get some other things operating in excellence, right? So
Right.
I think that, business is the same way. Everybody can just be so focused on revenue, money, money, money. And there's other factors that go into making sure your business not just makes money, but operates at a very high level. So I'm excited to talk about that with you today. Before we jump into it, give our audience a little bit of an intro about yourself and your business.
Great. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. So I characterize myself as an emerging and introverted entrepreneur now, but my professional background is in IT operations management.
Mm.
I started way back in college, undergraduate as a support technician. Then I worked as a network and systems administrator. But I quickly moved up into IT management and leadership, primarily in K-20 education. So I've headed several IT departments in both organizationally embedded leadership positions, as well as in virtual fractional interim chief information officer roles. And I continue to do that kind of CIO at your service and
Nice.
related process consulting right now. But I spend the bulk of my time on my software as a service startup, TaskTrain.
Love it. Love it. And process consulting is a term that you don't hear often, but I feel like it's just the nature of where small businesses is on the rise, right? Is getting those processes in order, getting them in place, and making sure things are operating at a very high efficiency. And
Yes.
you're also Six Sigma certified, right?
That's right. So I've been a what I call process pragmatist.
Yeah.
That's sort of a professional nickname that I adopted for myself. Well, first you have to understand that one of my personal peculiarities is that I have an alarming and almost annoying affection for alliteration. So I always try to find a way to work an alliterative turn of phrase into my work. Task train, process pragmatist, you get the idea. And
Yeah.
Six Sigma was training and certification was part of that because I've been very interested in systems and processes for all of my career. And I'm a member of the American Society for Quality, which is all about quality and process management.
Yeah, I love it. So now, listeners, you see why I said, you could be so focused on revenue. There's other things that you may need to get in order, and how much more appropriate than to talk about processes, right? Processes and systems. This is all of the good stuff, right? As an automation expert, these are words that just get my fingers and my toes tingling. So I wanted to set the table with this, Keith. SOPs. Okay. Standard
People are
operating.
cringing, Chris. Cringing. Yeah, standard
Right.
operating procedures.
I'm gonna walk people through this because I don't want to assume any intelligence and I don't want somebody to feel left out due to their negligence. So it's like, what is a standard operating procedure and why are they important?
Oh, that's a question for me.
Yeah.
Yes. What is a standard operating procedure? Well, that is, I believe, the core of your business, right?
Yes.
So you talk about being things more important than revenue, or things you have to pay attention to other than revenue.
Hmm.
Um, And that revenue is really an end result at the end of a long chain, right?
Yeah.
That's a signal that you have delivered something of value to your customer, and
Yes.
then revenue comes in as a result. But that process of delivering value to your customer, and that, what that process is, varies from organization to organization. In if you're manufacturing widgets, it's all of the steps in the supply chain to get the raw materials in for your widgets, to bringing those in, the assembly line, the packaging, the distribution, the sales. If you're a marketing agency, your delivery of value is very different. You're providing a service. You've got a set of clients who want you to create content for them on a regular production cycle, post to
Yeah.
social media. But there are still recurring steps in that value chain, right? That delivery of value to your customer that is ultimately going to result in the signal of revenue for your organization. And you can decompose that value, that set of processes, some of which are on the value chain, right? That in really going from your inputs to what your customer gets. Some of which are off of that value chain. They're just like overhead things that you need to
Yeah.
do for compliance, or just the human resources onboarding procedures that you have to go through. But those are still things that recur over and over again in your organization. And you want, I believe, as much as possible to have those procedures standardized. You want to have them written in and standardized so that you can do them consistently and achieve a level of quality in doing so. Otherwise, you're doing it ad hoc every time, and you're not necessarily going to get the quality result that you're going to want. You're setting yourself up, I think, for a lot of inefficiency. Creating bottlenecks to scale are just a couple
Hmm.
of the examples of things that don't happen. So standard operating procedure is really the core of the series of steps that you're going to do on a recurring basis to deliver value to your stakeholders or do something else that enables your business.
Yeah, and I'll say this, as an engineer, I was an electrical engineer, and I was not familiar with SOPs, standard operating procedures.
Okay.
I've heard of Six Sigma, like, in the talkings, but our I would say our cousin, our professional cousins were systems engineers, right?
Mm,
And they were the ones that did all of that.
yeah.
They were the ones that were heavy on the SOPs, heavy on the Six Sigma certification. There were some electrical engineers that did, but I was not. By default, I'm process oriented, but I had not made that connection until I started getting into small business entrepreneurship
Okay.
and marketing. And then I started to realize, oh, wait a minute. We If we're going to do this again, we should really standardize it so so it's not changing. So that, and even if somebody leaves the organization, it doesn't leave such a gap and void.
Exactly.
It just leaves an empty seat that needs to be filled instead of just like a breaking down of everything. So I started to learn an appreciation for SOPs as I grew as an entrepreneur. So my relationship is a little different. But with that being said, Keith, I it's common. Let me not say common, because it may differ depending on the circles and the industries that people are in. But specific to my industry, right? Digital marketers and agencies and SaaS founders, there's this ongoing back and forth seesaw with the value of SOPs.
Mm,
Because truth be told, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of small businesses that take the effort to document them, and then that's the beginning and end.
yeah.
They're pretty, they're somewhere, and whenever they need to be pulled out, maybe somebody will pull them out, but the day-to-day execution, they tend to be overlooked. So for you, in your experience, what is it? What approach should we be having in order to create SOPs and documented processes that we actually use day to day? Because
Right.
they're there for a reason, right?
Yeah, and I think you want to think about the reasons that you want them there. So first, let me make
Mm,
the case for why you'd want to go through the hassle of documenting your standard operating procedures in
yeah,
the first
yeah,
place, much less, micromanage their implementation every day, right? I mean, the question naturally rises: why not just get the right people on the bus, right? Hire the right people, point them in the right direction, and then get out of their way. I say absolutely. If you can do that, great. But I think there are reasons that even that is not enough. Uh, first, you might not be able to hire the right people, especially now. The job market in many places is tight, and I think finding the people with the knowledge and the experience you need to do that may be a real challenge.
yeah,
As an employer, you may be forced to invest in providing training and support to lower skilled and less experienced people just to get the resources you need. So one reason is that training and support, the scaffold that having documented standard operating procedures can provide there. Second, even if you get the right people, if you have them on board, it's not efficient or effective to have them work ad hoc on everything. Now,
hmm,
I think certainly if you're solving a new problem, working in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment, then you have to operate at least somewhat in an ad hoc fashion and trust the experience and intuition of the people you have working for you. But once
mm,
your team has solved the problem, you want to put it to sleep, right? Just implement the best solution that the team has come up with and follow it consistently to eliminate avoidable errors and increase efficiency, right? So that
yeah,
efficiency that you get by standardizing your procedure once you've solved the problem is going to allow you to scale your business by eliminating bottlenecks. Otherwise, you're going to be generating customer service problems due to mistakes and creating friction between your employees due to missed handoffs because everybody's doing something slightly differently.
yeah, yeah. And I think the term efficiency is what brings it home for me. Now, granted, I value efficiency. I am extremely high on that end of operation. Is I want
Yeah,
mines to be efficient, where some people just want it to be effective. Hey, look, don't care how long it
right,
takes, how many people it takes, get it done. Right.
right. Yeah.
I'm not that way. So efficiency becomes like my guiding light and principle. How do I get more and more efficient? And that to me is what brings this process of documenting process
Hmm.
down and really being intentional, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. And one of my other annoying alliterations is everyday efficiency, right? And that's what standard operating procedures get you, because these are the things you're doing every day in your
Yeah.
business over and over again, whatever that may be. It may be onboarding a new employee, it may be onboarding a new customer, it may be doing your sales outreach. There are a series of steps that your employees go through to operate your business, and standardizing that I think can lead to a lot of efficiency. And I want to come back to something that you talked about earlier,
Hmm.
which is the another reason for documenting your standard operating procedures uh, is risk mitigation, right? You talked about
Mm,
the employee leaving, right? So even if you don't encounter problems on a routine basis, your operation is fine with the employees you have. I think you're still putting your business at risk unnecessarily if you don't document your procedures. This is the proverbial hit by a bus situation, right? What
yeah,
happens
right.
to all of that tacit knowledge if a key employee gets hit by a bus? Or more likely, in the age of the great resignation that we're going through right now,
Yeah,
those key employees are going to leave for greener pastures, and all of that implicit knowledge is going to leave with them. And I mean,
yeah,
you brought that point out, and I think that's absolutely true.
yeah, yeah. You've got to be thinking about the big picture. I've got a best friend who's in the construction industry. He's got a startup that is helping the helping with the labor shortage, and they're seeing that a lot of their intelligence and IP is leaving as those workers retire. So you need these new young, uh, you know, this new young talent to come in, and you need them to get up to speed quickly. You
Right.
don't have time because that senior employee may be gone in a week or two, maybe
Yeah.
gone in a month or two. How do you get them acclimated, get them up to speed? And I think when we start to think about that in our business, uh, I I go through extensive leadership training. It's probably one of my favorite types of trainings to partake in. And one of the things that I've always operated by, because I've been taught, is run your business, run your job, your position, whatever it is, as if it doesn't need you. Like,
Yes.
make it so that you're not required. And Keith, I know when I was a corporate worker, that was the opposite. Job security was nobody knows how to do this but me, right? You kept all the tricks of the trade
Right.
close to your chest in your pocket, and some locked up at home just in case people found those. But now it's I feel like the strongest approach to growing a business, stabilizing a business, and scaling it is make sure you're operating it where there is no one single point of failure as a person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it, it not only is important to eliminate that single point of failure, that to minimize the risk to your organization. In today's operating environment, so much work is team-based and collaborative that you have to be able to coordinate among people, and having
Yes.
standard operating procedures um, also helps with that, because everybody's on the same page with how you are going to do things. So I think that there are like at least 6 major drivers for why it's critical for every organization to document their standard operating procedures, and we've talked about a bunch of them in the examples that I've given so far.
Okay.
But there's that efficiency gain, and you can see that in a lot of places uh, that you have recurring processes because you're doing them so frequently. If you can standardize and come up with an efficient way of doing it once and then repeat that, that pays huge dividends for your
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah.
And there's a quote by Taichi Ono, one of the founders of the Toyota production system, who's a major figure in the quality management movement. And he said, without standards, there can be no improvement. So you've got to
Mm,
set that standard of how you do business for the things that recur in your organization, and then work with your employees to document your standard operating procedures, so that they can collaborate effectively with one another, and they're not going to hide their knowledge in their head, under their desk, in the safe at home, whatever the
yeah.
case may be, and check them for efficiency.
Wow, that's a great quote. And it makes me think of the word standard twofold, right? We've been talking about it, standardizing, make sure there's this quality, consistent quality.
Mhm.
But it makes me think, and I'm going to do some name dropping here because Keith, I can. It's my podcast. But I think one of the biggest examples of what not to do is Chipotle. And I don't know about you, but out here, every single Chipotle is different. You
Oh,
could tell them the exact same thing. The exact same thing. You could
right.
take a picture of your order, and what you get is all.
Ah,
It's so frustrating. I don't even go to Chipotle anymore. I don't even
mm,
go to it anymore. And what triggered that thought is, as a customer on the receiving end, poor quality. Whatever the standard is for Chipotle,
yeah,
I don't know, because it's a shake of the dice what I get back. So
right.
when I'm thinking about business, Keith, how many times has somebody had a good experience with support and then bad experience with that same
Right.
company's
The
support?
variability. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Now, granted, these are humans. We're all, on
Yes.
a uncontrollable spectrum in a sense.
Yes.
But what is I guess what I'm saying to my listeners is, what is that standard in your business that you want to be apparent? There's got to be a level that, okay, by at a worst case scenario, we never drop below this. The flip side, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, I don't care how I've seen people yell at these workers at Chick-fil-A, and they're always smiling. Oh, sorry about that. Would you like a brownie? Like, it's almost like, hold on, is there a battery in their back?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Right.
this
Right.
can't be a human response. But you see the standard, Keith. The
Mhm.
standard has been set. and it's held like that in your business. So you just talking through this, Keith, is giving me a different, like another level of appreciation for standard operating procedures, because there is a standard that I want to be apparent in the marketplace, that I want people to know my company by,
Right.
and operating procedures allow me to achieve that standard for longevity, and
Yes.
consistency.
Yeah, and I think that's really well said. If you look at the most admired companies, they have set a very high quality standard and they hit
Yep.
it consistently.
Yep.
How do they do that? One of the reasons is that their core processes are very standardized,
Yep.
and so I've admired companies like Apple, who have this enormous creative side, but the quality of the device and the service that they deliver is very high because they have operations management really dialed in.
Yeah.
And it's been my mission to try to bring process to the people, right? To bring that big company uh, quality a standard and make it accessible to people in small and medium businesses, which is really where I grew up. When my background has primarily
Yeah.
been in small enterprise, where you frequently don't even have standard operating procedures written down,
Yep.
which kind of blows my mind because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really so easy to do, and there's so many benefits of doing it that I think it's an low-hanging fruit that will pay dividends in your organization on multiple levels. It's like I said, you're going to decrease the customer dissatisfaction by having high standards and standard procedures for achieving them. You're going to decrease your employee dissatisfaction
Yep.
with somebody dropped the ball because they did it a different way, or I'm still waiting on X from my coworker because
Yep.
we just don't have our act together internally.
Yep.
um, and it's going to, in the end, pay dividends in your ability to generate revenue and get that signal that you're doing something right and delivering value.
Absolutely. And what I want to do is I want to make a quick shift here for our last few minutes together, Keith. And I want to talk about that path, that decision,
Yes.
that driver, the motivation that went from consultant to founder. There was at some point, I'm imagining, I talk to founders all the time on the podcast, and a lot of times software is birthed out of them scratching
Yes.
their own itch. Right? So I'd
You got
imagine
it.
after a while of just seeing the mistakes, the and these don't have to be big mistakes, it's
No.
small
Right.
mistakes of not doing the right thing over time that become big. What was that driver that said, you know what? I think I'm going to solve this problem at scale with software.
Exactly the situation I was in. Scratch my own itch. So, the specific crystallizing event for the idea behind TaskTrain occurred a number of years ago when I listened to the audiobook of the Checklist Manifesto by Harvard
Mm,
medical professor and surgeon Atul Gawande. But the impetus that led to that moment came from long experience in IT before that. So I mentioned I was a systems administrator. In that role, I was really too often burned by lack of documentation, either system configuration or procedural
mm,
documentation. Just something would break, and I would have no idea how to fix it.
yeah, yeah,
Even if I had set the system up a few months ago, that knowledge, because it's so specialized, really was no longer even in my head. So I
mm,
became diligent in documenting everything I did. I carried that lesson with me when I advanced to leadership, and my motto became, if it's not documented, it's not done. In my
mm,
leadership roles, I would ensure my teams would develop and verify documentation as part of project implementation, and that we had all of our critical and routine standard operating procedures written down, as we've been talking about the importance of so far. But even with a really caring team and competent employees and all that documentation in place, I found that we screwed up way more than we should have. And on dumb stuff,
mm,
like you said, it doesn't have to be big things, but things that were
right.
entirely avoidable if we had
Yep.
consistently followed those procedures. And that's because in my case, IT is complicated. Not everything can be automated, so there's still that human factor you talked about before. We're all human beings in the end, and we make mistakes. And in the rush of trying to serve a user, finish a device setup, one of my techs, they would forget a step, and that would inevitably come back to bite us. So I forgot to deploy the anti-malware after reinstalling the operating system. Keylogger got installed. Not good. So there are real consequences, real cost consequences,
Yep.
and real customer relationship consequences for errors like that are entirely avoidable. So in those IT management roles, even though we had those standard operating procedures and we tracked our service requests in a ticketing system, there was still this gap between that ticketing workflow and those SOPs. So when I heard Atul Gawande talking about the remarkable results that he got from the humble checklist. So in the checklist manifesto, he describes the use of checklists in construction and in aviation, and his own work with the World Health Organization, bringing checklists into healthcare with the Safe Surgery checklist. And that generated like a 40% reduction in surgery deaths, a 36% reduction in surgical complications. Very simple, right? Just following a checklist. When I heard that, I thought that maybe this idea presented a way to bridge the gap between just having documented your procedures and then actually integrating them into everyday workflow. So I started to flesh out a prototype for TaskTrain, the software as a service application that I'm privileged to have launched, and that's where I am today.
Let me pause you there, Keith. That going into like fleshing out the software, did you have experience in the past doing software? Were you exposed to it in any way? What gave you that confidence to go in there and document it as you did?
Well, I think when you start out with the beginner's mind, as I did, because I had taken some core computer science courses when I was an undergrad, but and I'd done scripting as a systems administrator, but I had not done enterprise software development. No, if you're not a subject matter expert, you always underestimate the complexity of any task. So let's just say that, as with any entrepreneurial journey, it's been quite a long and bumpy path. But I'm very pleased that my partners and I have built the tool that I wanted to, and done it without outside funding. So I'm excited to be able to have it out in the world and chat with you about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the marketer side of me is wanting to probe a little deeper with the go to market challenges that you face. If you want to share a challenge or two that you face, you went through the dev process, got the MVP up, probably had some beta users in there, test some things out. Now we're ready. We're slowly rolling it out further with more and more users. What were some of the challenges that you faced as you started to see the end of the tunnel? Like, wait a minute, the software is ready. I think we can go and tell the market we're available, right?
Oh yes, and that presents a whole new set of challenges and learning experiences. Let's frame them from that way. I and especially with the problem I chose to solve and the way I chose to solve it with TaskTrain, this is an enormous challenge for us because in many ways I've built a horizontal platform, right? I've built a piece of software that allows you to very easily document your standard operating procedures as outline as a checklist with multiple levels in them, and embed training at each of those steps, right? And then you can assign those standard operating procedures and turn them into workflows that people can collaborate on, with each step having a different assignee, comment threads at each of those steps so you can easily collaborate, right?
Nice.
That platform, that can be applied to any organization that has recurring processes, and that makes marketing it, as I'm sure you're able to tell me better, a real challenge, because I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and you were talking about that if your market is everybody, your market is no one, and you really need
Right.
to focus. So I think that is the challenge we are facing right now. Is that we've
Yeah.
successfully built a soft piece of software that solves a problem that many people have, but we are a founder-funded startup, don't have huge marketing budgets, really do need to focus on a customer profile that
Yeah.
has the biggest pain, right? Who is
Yeah.
really facing that
Love it.
challenge. Um, so that's where we are right now. I can certainly
Yeah.
go. I could go on about this particular
Right.
challenge indefinitely, but I'll stop there.
Right. No, thank you for sharing. I always am intrigued. I've by the nature of what I do. My digital Rolodex is split between a whole bunch of savvy marketers and then a whole bunch of savvy CEOs. So I hear both sides, and it's just always interesting to let, of course, the listeners hear, but always, just check in. I'm always fascinated with the process of development and marketing.
Right.
It's just such an interesting relationship. But there's one thing in closing I want to say
Yeah.
that I found works really well for me, Keith.
Great.
And based on how you set up your software, it sounds like you were probably privy to this far before I was. Okay, and it's the idea that my SOPs, what I'm learning in my business is the SOPs are great for that person just getting started, need to get familiar with the process for the first time. But I don't necessarily need them to go through that SOP every time. It gets to be a bit big for the task. So, what my operations manager has started to do is create checklists based on those SOPs. So, once you know the process,
Yes.
you can go through it. You don't have to go through the SOP, but you better make sure you generate this checklist and and
Mhm.
check everything off. You mentioned it when you were talking about your software, how you can do the SOP, you can split it out to workflows and create checklists. It sounds like this is something that you have been aware of along the way as well.
Absolutely. So I think there are a lot of advantages to the checklist format
Hmm.
for a lot of things, but for standard operating procedures in general, because your
Yeah.
typical standard operating procedure, right, is very long. It's like text based, long paragraphs explaining what to do. Maybe if you're lucky, you get some pictures in there. If there's like some piece of software you're supposed to be doing at a particular step, but
Yeah.
that can be overwhelming, and that's why people. That's one of the reasons people like don't refer back to them after they've done the initial learning, because they're just very clumsy to work with.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
checklists are very succinct. When you're talking about a particular step, you've got to be very concise in describing it. You're just jogging the person's memory at that point when
Yes.
they're going through the checklist the 10th time. But at the same time, oh yeah, it's easy to forget a step. It's like it's you have that curse of knowledge, and if you're not using a checklist to complete a procedure, you think you know everything because you've done it all the time. But maybe you're
Yeah.
distracted. Maybe the phone rang and you forget a step. The checklist gives you that check on making sure that you've done it right, but it doesn't overwhelm you with too much detail. And the design of
Yeah.
TaskTrain is really built on that. If you want the detail, it's there, but
It's
it's one level down. You don't have to look at it every time. You can just check
Yep.
the point off when you've done it because you know how to do it. But if you're that new employee, you get the best of both worlds because you have the outline of exactly what to do. And then if there's a place where you get stuck, we provided as much content, multimedia, videos, diagrams. You can embed whatever you need for your employees to get that just-in-time training.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh man, this was a very wealthy conversation.
Loved
I've
it.
got some notes here. I am a student of process, a student of process. So anytime there's software to make that easier, and anytime I can talk to somebody who's just neck deep, right? I don't want ankles. I don't want knee deep. I want neck deep into just the nitty gritty of creating operational excellence. I mean, that's really
That's
what
what
we're
it's about.
talking about, right?
Exactly.
Is making sure that your operations, whatever those systems are, that they are at their optimum, right, at all times. So, thank you, Keith, for coming on and sharing your expertise, your story, and your software. If people want to find out more about you or your software, where can they go?
Well, I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you, and I would encourage you and your audience, if you're interested, to check out tasktrain.app. That's APPTASKTRAIN.app. You can sign up for a totally free account there. We have a free forever tier, and that's also the best way to reach me. So you can reach out via the Messenger app inside TaskTrain.app, as well as see my social media and contact links on the people page of our website.
All right, great. Well, we'll have that link in the show notes.
Great.
All listeners. Thank you again, Keith, for coming on, man.
Fantastic. Thanks
All
so
right,
much, Chris.
have a good one, man.
Take care.